On today's episode, I'm really pleased to be talking with our own Ryan Harris. Ryan recently joined us as our Network Practice Director, so he oversees all things network and connectivity for Plow. Ryan has been in this game for over 15 years, so he brings a ton of experience in managed network and security services to the table. And though he joined us only 4 months ago, he has announced his presence with authority in terms of the talent he has attracted to his team and the improvements he has made to our network practice overall. I've asked Ryan to join me today to talk about a classic cut-the-shit issue, buying technology you don't need. We see this a lot in the network and security space, so Ryan's background and experience give him a great perspective on this, and a few war stories to boot. We'll delve into some reasons why he thinks this happens, some ideas about how to avoid it if you're on the buying side, and I'll finish up by trying to start an argument with Ryan about the best way to cook a Thanksgiving turkey. Enjoy. Welcome to the podcast, Ryan.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you here. It would be remiss if I acted like this was the first time I'd seen you today.
We could act like that.
Well, that's true. We could, but it's not true. So, and I do know a little bit about your backstory, but for the benefit of our millions of listeners out there, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So, I'm still pretty young. You know, I'm not
Come
old.
on now.
I'm not old yet. I promise. But anyway, so yeah, I kind of started out. I've been in the industry for probably 12 years now. I started out on the network side, same side, really just as a net admin, working for a company that is more contract work. And I got just really interested in it, right? And I was like, thought maybe I could make this a career. So I kind of moved around here locally and ended up working for another MSP, ISP here with a focus on data center services, and then ended up here about 4 months ago. So,
excellent. So let's take a few steps back. So where'd you grow up? Kind of where are you from originally?
So originally from Tennessee. So I grew up not far from here. I tried not to go too far from home because, if you ever have to move back in with your parents, you don't want to have to rent a big truck, right, and go very far. So
I never thought of that as a downside risk management tool, but hey, there you go.
It's risk mitigation, 100%.
It's true.
Yeah. Anyway, from here, the Mount Juliet area, born and raised, then kind of moved out into the city when I took a job out here. And just recently, my wife and kids, we just moved back to the Murfreesboro area because, if you want to live in Nashville right now, you have to be pretty much a millionaire. So, yeah. Yeah,
it's a strange but true story. As someone who grew up here, now when I move around the country and talk to people and you tell them you're from Nashville, it's a really cool thing.
Yeah,
and
100%.
Trust me, 25, 30 years ago, that was not the case. People thought they felt a little sorry for you.
Yeah, you can thank us millennials. You're welcome.
Yes, thank you. And as our one of our marketing team members would tell you, finding a place to live here is no joke. If you're trying to find something that's reasonably priced and
I can understand that.
2.5 hours away from town.
Yeah, well, there's pros and cons to everything.
That's right. So today, we talked a little bit about this. I gave you a heads up, which I broke my rule as a strict journalist. I'm not supposed to tell you what I'm going to ask you, but I did tell you a little bit about what we're going to get into today. But we wanted to talk about this idea of folks needing a specific technology and the belief that they need a specific technology.
Sure.
And then related to that around security, since both of those kind of fall into your area. And so, maybe start. Can you give me some examples, in your career where you remember talking to a customer or prospective customer, or maybe even an existing customer already wanting something new, who when you try to have a conversation with them, they knew what they wanted, and you figured out pretty quickly, or you at least thought maybe that's not the right answer.
Yeah, it probably happens more than most people realize. I could think of one good example. We had a pretty large healthcare client, and they were dead set on a specific technology or system that they needed around security, and they had already picked out what manufacturer they were going to use and how they were going to implement it and what areas of the business they were going to implement it. And when we first had a call with them, we were like, hey, anytime we go into these engagements, right? Like we want to understand the business need, right? Like what triggered this? Like what's the business case for doing this? And it was pretty quickly apparent that there wasn't one, and that this is like I like to say, like CIO magazine. They pick it up on the plane and they're like, I want that because that guy, I like him, and he told me I needed it. So yeah, it probably happens more than you know, but in that particular instance, we really kind of had to like take a step back and be like, okay, let's really evaluate like what's the business going to gain from this, right? Like, is this something that we're buying because somebody's told you needed it and you really don't have a business case for it, or is this something that the business is gonna benefit from? And I mean, the answer is probably no. The business isn't going to benefit as much as you would think, more often than not.
How did that conversation go? I mean, my assumption was there was someone championing, who already made the case, at least internally, that this was a good idea to somebody.
Yeah, I think when you come into those conversations, the decision makers are usually like donkey on the edge. Like they're just ready to pull the trigger. They just want to know how much they need to write the check for.
They assume that they've already thought about matching
they've already
technology
they've read an article or they've talked to somebody who implemented it. But a lot of that gets lost in translation, and so when you're in those conversations, they can go south pretty quick, because here is this customer who's like, here, take my money, like we want to implement this, and you're like, maybe but let's look and see why we need to do that. And it can become very contentious very quickly if you don't kind of disarm that, because to them, they see that as like, do you not want to work with us? Like, what, we'll just go to somebody else who'll do this for us.
It's kind of a weird violation of the trust. Right?
It is. Yeah. Which is weird, because like you think I'm like, don't have your back or something, or I don't have your best interest, when in all reality, it's actually quite opposite. Like I'm trying to keep your best interest in mind so that you don't spend $500,000, $1 million, $2 million on a product or service or infrastructure that you don't need. Yeah. But it's hard to convey that message in that moment, because quite often those decision makers are already sold on that product or that service, and so changing their mind at that point it's a tall hill to climb.
And this may not have been the case in this instance, but was there a vendor involved or a manufacturer involved at some point prior to this discussion that had colored this? Not to throw shade on all vendors, but I mean,
you could if
you're selling, we talk about this all the time around here. What you sell becomes important because you're selling it, right? And becomes a good solution,
right,
because you're selling it. I mean, that's just the way it is. We sell cloud services here, so we think cloud services are really great.
Sure.
And I actually believe that, but it also happens to be in my economic interest to believe that, right? And there are others who maybe don't see the world the same way for different reasons. So in this case, I was curious, was there a vendor involved at all?
Yeah, there was and there wasn't, right? So they hadn't reached out to a particular vendor to start those conversations, but they had clearly done some research on what they felt they needed and what they wanted to use and who they wanted to use. So even at that point in the conversations, it's hard to get them out of that. Focusing on that vendor and, well, this is the best thing that we need because this vendor says they have the best X, of anybody else who does the same thing, right? And vendors who are selling products, whether it be infrastructure or services or applications, right? Like everybody has their own little, feathers in their cap that they tout that they use for marketing, and it's in that case it was us just trying to maybe bring some things to light that people hadn't thought about yet.
Right. It seems to be, it's prevalent across the board in terms of technology, but security in particular seems to be a problematic area.
Definitely.
In this regard. And I get it, like security's super scary, right? There aren't very many things right now that feel like one thing can go wrong and could kill the business, right? But a lot of those seem to fall into the security bucket.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
So the sort of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt quotient or at least opportunity to talk about that around security solutions is big, right?
Right. Yeah, it is, and just cybersecurity in general, and just focusing on network security and just data security, anything security related. We've, as a society, we've kind of put our lives and and really kind of put everything that we do into technology, whether it be our cell phones or laptops, and so I think when you start thinking about the real possibility of well, what if somebody gets my information? Now they'll have credit card data and what I searched on Google last night, and it just becomes this it's a fear, right? So as humans, by nature, we're going to do whatever we need to do to not let that happen, and it's especially true, I think, with companies who are responsible for safeguarding that security per se. I think it's especially true there. Is there's this level of innate responsibility, that your customers are putting this responsibility in you to make sure that you safeguard whatever they have, right? And so security's it's a tough world to live in right now and to try to navigate, and I think that as somebody who does what we do, I think we kind of have to look at everything through a security lens, right?
Yeah, and a lot of what you just described there, it makes me realize, right? I hadn't really thought about it this way, but how much emotion is tied up in a security, not just a security purchase, but the idea of security.
Yeah.
Whether that's your personal informational security or your company or corporate.
Right.
We tend to think about it as, it's a risk for the business, an economic risk. But I mean, what you just pointed out really is maybe something a little bit bigger than that, and that probably makes this whole purchasing process or sort of vetting process that much more difficult.
Yeah, it is, because there is that emotional aspect, right? Because it's data security, and just it's become so much more now than just safeguarding credit card numbers and social security numbers. You're talking about pictures of your kids and what you ate for dinner last night and where you drove, and it's so technology and subsequently security is so ingrained in everything we do now that it touches everybody, and there's an emotional impact to that. And I think that is starting to become very relevant and very real to just people in general, our society.
Yeah, and not that this is new or particularly insightful, but the internet, by its very nature, its openness is both its greatest strength and its greatest weakness, right?
Absolutely.
And the reality is there is no fully secure network or a fully secure environment if you're going to connect and be networked with the outside world through the internet.
Right.
And to say that out loud maybe makes some people scared, but it's never been not the case.
Yeah.
It's probably not a good double negative, but nevertheless, we're going to stick with it.
It made sense to me, though.
Yeah. Okay. Good. But so have you had conversation? One of the things that's always interested to me, having been on the other side and had to buy technology and try to secure an environment that was in financial services and had all of the, sort of these elements we're talking about, trying to explain to non-technical people this idea that, hey, look, there's no way we can make this thing secure. That's a very scary thing to hear when you're someone who's got a personal guarantee on a loan for a business, and to think wait, you're telling me I can't secure this 100%? And the answer is absolutely not.
No.
Right. But, we tend to think somehow differently about technology because we also know that there's no 100% guarantee of security with the people who walk in and out of your business. I mean, if you told people that for every 100 employees you hired, there's a chance that one of them is probably going to steal something from you, they would probably say, oh, that's not that big a surprise.
Right.
They wouldn't be that surprised. They might be a little disappointed. But
and it's not, Joe.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you got to watch out for Joe.
Yeah, 100%.
But something about the technology at least makes us think that we can do something different with it.
Sure.
And so I'm just curious, can you think back to some of the conversations you've had with clients over the years where you felt like you were bumping up against that?
Yeah, and I've seen this quite a few times, and a lot of times it stems from, a lot of the engagements that we have are it's like post-mortem, right? Like a lot of times people don't decide to make a decision, especially when it comes to like security, until something's happened. And that's what really triggers like, oh shit, we got to do something about this.
It's okay to say shit on this podcast.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I did see the name.
This isn't dad life.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. Anyway, so yeah, it's you have these conversations after something's happened, right? And there's this innate, just overwhelming fear with people where they want to know just immediately that like, hey, what you're going to do is going to fix everything, right? Like we're not going to be like, we're going to have zero risk and this is never going to happen again, right? And you've got to you got to get out of that pretty quick, because if the longer that you allow somebody to believe that, the harder it's going to be to kind of come back from that. And I think telling somebody, hey, no, that's not the way it's working. And we talked about this, like if you want to do that, like get off the internet, like 100%. That will. That's the
100% answer.
Right? Then you'll be 100%. Then nothing's ever going to happen to you bad from a cyber standpoint. But yeah, I mean, you have those conversations, and then you have it becomes real, right? To a lot of decision makers and a lot of companies that like we can't. There's no solution that's going to provide us the ability to say, you know what? We bought this product, we bought this service, so this will never happen to us again. I mean, it's just not true. It's not going to happen. We talk about bad actors, like there's people coming up with new ways to attack networks and the internet every hour. I mean, every minute there's people inventing new ways to do things. And so it's not possible. And that's a hard bridge to cross. And I think a lot of times it's a bridge that a lot of decision makers aren't willing to cross. Like it's one of those things where like, you know what, I'll just talk to somebody else. Like somebody else will tell me yes. And that's where you get into a lot of, companies that are like, yeah, we'll do that. We'll 100%. You'll never get attacked again. And that's a whole different conversation.
Right. Well, and there's that obviously. And then there's that's a great opportunity for, I'll call product development, but that might even be generous, but coming up with new ways of positioning products to maybe not say 100% that you'll never get hacked or this will solve all your problems, but pretty close to that, or dazzling people with, AI and algorithms and machine learning and vector mapping and lots of cool lingo and frankly real technology. I'm not saying it's not.
Absolutely.
But I'm gonna put you on the spot a little. In your mind, what are some of the best bullshit technologies out there around security that you're seeing?
I'm gonna make a lot of people mad.
That's okay. It's okay. I mean, we're not. It doesn't mean that there's not. It's more maybe the gap between what they say they can do and what they actually do.
Yeah, I mean, you could there's a list in security, because there's a lot of companies who feed off that fear, right, of like protecting data. And that you look at like SIM products, like we're going to tell you everything that happens on your network. We're going to tell you exactly when it happened, and we're going to correlate those logs to like all of your infrastructure, and you're going to know without a doubt what happened and what it affected. Like that's bullshit. It's like, no, those, and here's the deal: is like there's a huge place for those types of services, and there's a huge place for those types of solutions. I think the problem is a lot of times is the way they're marketed and the way they're sold as like an end-all be-all solution.
Right.
Like if you just buy this product from us, you're good. You don't have to worry about anything again. When in reality, it's like, hey, this product will help you, like, get to where you want to be and like making your network or your posture more secure. But it's not a one size fits all. It's not a magic wand.
Right. And it adds work, right? I mean,
it does.
Even in a situation like where you've got kind of a SOC as a service or something where there are humans looking at that data flow and doing analysis and putting reports together, for you. Well, somebody has to look at that, and somebody has to decide: are we going to do something different? Are we going to make changes? Whatever outcomes. I mean, what are some examples of things that you've seen on kind of the back end of those that ended up being like more ongoing work and I'll call active management of the network that the company maybe wasn't prepared for?
Yeah, I mean, I've dealt with this recently with a local financial institution. Several years ago, essentially they wanted SIM, right? Like we're gonna have SIM, we want it, and we're gonna buy it, and whatever it cost. And so we implemented it, and we started sending them, all these logs and like alerts of things that were happening on their network. And literally, the guy who was responsible for like overseeing the implementation was like, "Make these stop. I can't go through these. I don't have time. I'm not gonna do anything about them." And it was like, What? I mean, we can make them stop, but
that's what you bought it
what's
for.
What's the point?
Right.
Right,
that was the idea. Right.
This was the whole idea, and it just goes to show you, like, I think there's I think in that case, it's just this kind of like misconception that like just implementing this was going to take care of everything, that there's no work that has to be done on the back end.
Right.
So that in itself, I think that's where you see a lot of the problem of like, these magic services. Yeah,
there's a mismatch there. I think expectations versus reality. Definitely. Doesn't mean the reality is not helpful or good,
sure, but
it's that gap.
Yep.
So we're giving them a hard time on one technology. Let's go the other direction. What's an undervalued security technology from your perspective that people don't think or talk enough about? Maybe we just take it for granted now.
Smart people. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is like phishing. Like, don't click on don't click on a link you don't know what it is. Like, don't do that. In all seriousness, I think that one of the biggest tools that people can use, and there's a million different flavors, is just understanding your network better, whether that be through mapping a network or doing some kind of assessment or doing some kind of traffic study and using SFlow or NetFlow or something to give you insight into what's going on your network. I think where a lot of people get in trouble is they just don't understand what's going on in their network. They don't have a clue.
So how do they know if something bad is going on if they don't know what it's supposed to
be?
Right.
If you don't know what's normal, how do you know that something's
abnormal?
Right. And so I think the best advice I can give people is like, just understand your network and understand what normal looks like via whatever avenue you want to do to obtain that. Like, just understand what's going on in your network. You wouldn't like you want to understand what's like going on in your house, right? Like, especially with my kids, like which, let's be honest, I don't understand what's going on in my house a lot of the times. That's either here or there, but it's the same thing, right? Just you want to understand what's going on in your network so you can identify something when it's not right.
Well, that seems to, I know enough about your priors that I've got a little inside baseball here, but the simplicity of a network is...
It made it sound like I had a criminal record when you said that, my priors.
Well, I mean, maybe you do. I don't know.
Maybe.
I can't share that on this podcast.
That would be kind of cool, though, if I was like,
You're now a white hat instead of a black hat guy.
Yeah, if I was like some like notorious... Oh, man.
Sorry,
I missed an opportunity there.
You did. God. You did. I know enough about your priors to know that you have a penchant for simplicity when it comes to network design.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about that and maybe some examples where complexity caused some real issues for clients along the way.
Yeah. So, I do love simplicity because it aids in success.
But why? I'm going to push on that.
So why? So a lot of times what people run into in our industry, IT is a very fluid industry. We all know that, right? And it's especially true with resources, right? You don't tend to see, especially, engineers, network engineers, systems engineers who stay in one place for a long period of time. You tend to 5 to 7, 8 years in a role in IT, you move on, right? It's just kind of the nature of the industry. Here's where people get in trouble is, with a complex network, that turnover creates problems in itself, because if I've got a complex network, if I've got to have somebody come in and learn that network, it's going to be a lot a lot bigger transition, right? For somebody to come in and go, okay, well, this is a huge network. It's very complex. I don't have any experience with this. I'm 2 weeks into my job. I'm going to have to learn all this.
Right. Something goes bump, then there's a problem.
Right. And then the backside, just what you said, even if when you've got a guy who's been there 10 years and he's only designed the network, even with complex networks, identifying problems is that much harder, right? Because there's more layers of infrastructure that you have to go through to identify a problem, and that in itself, if you can keep things simple, there's a lot less of that has to take place when there's issues or when you've got turnover than you do when you have a complex network.
I mean, this might beg the question a bit, but is it easier or harder to put together simple networks versus complex?
I would probably qualify that with you can build a really complex network that works really bad, that functions poorly. I think by nature, simple networks are usually pretty easy. On the flip side of that, with complex networks, you usually have more resources engaged. But is it easier? It's easier to build simpler networks. That's just by nature, right? But
then why don't more people do it?
Marketing.
Back to the problem we were talking about previously.
So everybody wants the best thing, right? Like we all want to drive a Cadillac or whatever today's version of a
Maybe that's not a good example.
Yeah, it's probably a bad example. A Tesla? I don't know. Anyway, so you have these companies who are selling these things that are the best at what they do, but not everybody needs them, right? But there's nobody in the industry right now who's going, you don't need that. What they're saying is, don't buy that. Buy my stuff because I do it better. Not, you don't need what I do. So you have a lot of these very overcomplicated networks around the world that quite frankly, there's no need for.
Do you see that as more of an in-house created, and a staff that's internal to a company? And we're going to assume mostly larger. Not that they don't necessarily have to be huge, but larger companies would be more likely to have, or at least the potential for more complexity around their network, just because they're bigger, right? I mean, just because it's bigger doesn't mean it has to be complex, but it's hard to get too complex if it's a real small setup. But do you see that more of a function of internally managed networks, or are there some forces driving, outsourced providers of network management to lean into complexity because it makes maybe you're more needed in the process on the back end?
Yeah, definitely the latter there. I mean, you have a lot of, you hate to say job security, right? But you have a lot of partners, a lot of service providers who lean on that complexity because by nature, that complexity lends them to, hey, you're going to have to keep us around to manage this thing because it's too complex for you. And so because of the nature of the business and because of IT is this magic thing that nobody knows how to do except the select few people in the world, you have decision makers who are like, yep, we agree. We don't want to mess with it. We don't know what it is because there's these magic boxes and they do what. So, we're going to continue to pay you. I think some of it is, I think there's a stigma around, especially in the engineering community, that if I don't build, if I don't inject some complexity into the network, I'm going to be looked down on that. I'm not a good engineer. So I gotta over complicate this network to tout my
chops.
I'm a
good engineer. I can do the hard stuff.
Engineer. Look at this. Yeah. No, that's a terrible way to look at it.
That has problems all over the place, right? Thinking about return on investment, isn't necessarily easy when it comes to network design, I don't think, because, a complicated network or a simple network can both operate just fine for long periods of time. If there's an issue, then quantifying or figuring out, how hard was it to figure out how to get it back on track, right? you don't know that until you have an outage. Well, that means you've already bought and installed everything, so it's too late from that standpoint. I mean, obviously, cost-wise, a more complex network would cost more.
Right.
You generally would have more gear and more software.
Sure.
But outside of that, it's a little tricky. How else, I mean, having been on this side and thinking about trying to make a return off of managing networks, how have you thought about the return on investment perspective, maybe as a provider? And where does that lend itself to the simplicity, argument you're trying to make?
Yes. So, and something that I've tried to do, and I know that, kind of we collectively, you and I kind of have the same belief on, and Plow in general is like just trying to flip that around to where, hey, like, you don't need us because you have this overcomplicated network and we're the only ones who can do it. Like, let us help you focus on your business. So you're not just, focusing on the day-to-day mundane tasks that are required to manage a network. I think we get so caught up in, especially on the managed service provider side of like, I guess we just look at it, a lot of service providers look at it in the wrong light, when in reality we should be looking at it in a light of let us help you do what you do better, not let us manage your network. Let us help you focus on your business. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that we can do for clients and customers is kind of flipping that over.
I think that's a pretty good place to kind of, we'll put a pin in that and stop on the network side as far as that discussion goes. One of the things I always like to do in these conversations is ask a few little curveball questions to you, maybe on the personal side.
That sounds fancy.
Yeah, well, it's pretty fun. Since I didn't put these, you don't know what's coming, so it's always better that way. But I had a couple in mind that they're softball, so don't get too nervous.
I'm going to swing at them.
But it's the holiday season. Thanksgiving is approaching, and Christmas is around the corner. So a couple things are really important for me, to know if I can really trust someone. And the first one is, when is it okay to start listening to Christmas music?
Oh, I'm glad my wife's not here right now because she'd be very mad at me. Gosh, I love Christmas. Can I just that especially like when you have kids, like it's like a whole
it's hard to get much better.
Yeah, it's like a whole different deal now. But I think I'm old school here. December 1st, like you're in the month. Like,
you want to wait till December?
Yeah, I just feel like
God, November must be rough for you.
It is. Yeah, it's really rough, especially like you go to Target and it's like blaring.
It's cranking right now.
Oh, 100%. You can go listen to like the entire Mariah Carey album at Target. I just like I think the longer you pull out that Christmas music, like it taints it. Like it's not as like
okay.
I want that whole month of December to be like.
Yeah, we've always been the day after Thanksgiving, so
but I could go with that because you're only a couple days away.
Yeah, that's close. It's close.
But you got to wait till after Thanksgiving. You got to wait till after Thanksgiving.
Fair enough. Well, I know why the retailers do it. I get it. You
remember that marketing thing we talked about?
Yes, exactly. They got product to move. So
100%.
I understand.
Yeah.
But in a perfect world, day after Thanksgiving for me.
Yeah, I get it.
All right. So for turkey on Thanksgiving, we deep fry our turkey. We've cooked it in the oven before. And I have a strong preference for one of those, but I'm curious to know, how do you guys do your turkey?
Neither. Yeah. So as a kid, we deep fried them. My dad deep fried it, which if you've never seen your dad deep fry turkey, it's hysterical, especially if you've never done it before. That's the best thing on earth. Anyway.
I hope we didn't put the frozen one in there and it blow up.
No,
because that's actually what happens. It's pretty ugly. Go to YouTube and watch.
Yeah, I'm going to look those up now. Well, that blew my productivity for the rest of the day. I can't say recently, the last couple of years, smoked turkeys. I've been smoking things.
Okay.
So do like a Cajun rub, and then you can't beat that. I'm telling you, smoked turkey is the way to go.
Well, as a born and raised Southerner, anything is better if you fry it. So I'm gonna have to stick with fried turkey. But I get it. Smoked. I'll give you that. I get it. That's a plus.
So do you inject it with anything?
No, you don't need to. You just rub it.
Like take it out of the thing and like
just deep fry it in peanut oil, rub it with a dry rub, and
okay. So you at least you put some kind of seasoning.
Yeah, for sure. But it's anyway.
Maybe we should exchange.
And it's
turkeys.
A little bit of danger. It's kind of scary, so that makes it adds a little bit of fun to it.
Adrenaline.
Yeah, there's a little bit to that, for sure.
Okay.
So
I can respect that.
Give that a
We should swap turkeys one year.
Well, let's do that. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Last question. What's the best Christmas gift you ever got?
Oh, man.
Because mine stands out of my mind. Like, it's so crystal clear to me. Which I think maybe is weird, but.
Yeah, I mean, I know it as a father what I'm supposed to say. And that's like one of my kids was born in December, so
no.
Yeah.
I'm talking about a gift. That's
100%.
You helped create that. That doesn't count.
I got a Red Ryder BB gun. I know that sounds crazy, but I got a BB gun on my sixth
Thanks,
birthday.
Ralphie.
100%. Yeah, I got a Red Ryder BB gun. And here's the funny. This is a good story.
Shoot your eye out with that thing.
Yeah, almost. So here's the funny thing is, at the time I got that, I still there's gonna be some kids listening. I still believed in Santa.
I don't think any kids listen to this podcast, but that's okay.
I'm just saying, you stumble into stuff on YouTube sometimes, and
we're all about mysticism here. Who knows?
Sparkle.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we were at Walmart, me and my dad and my mom, and I wanted a BB gun, and so I still believed in Santa, so I'd asked Santa for the BB gun, and so we were in the store. And my mom had taken me off somewhere, and my dad had gone off by himself. I didn't know at the time. Now I've put the dots together.
What he was doing.
Yeah. And so I get back, and we get back to the cart, and I see this BB gun on the bottom, I call it the toilet paper rack.
Underneath, yeah.
Yeah, there's this BB gun, and my dad has crudely put his jacket over it, but I can see the barrel and the stock. And so at that point, I was like, you got to be kidding me. It was like this mixed emotion of I'm getting the BB gun, but also there's no Fat Man.
Yeah, exactly.
What?
I know where this stuff is coming from.
Yeah, it was
it's a bummer.
It was a bummer.
But it also didn't make you think your parents didn't. I mean, I remember when I found out, because I had an older sister, so you know how that goes.
Yeah.
I thought I was sad, but then I thought, that's pretty cool that my parents do that.
Yeah.
That's how dumb you are when you're 9.
Yeah. I guess my thought was because I'm a weirdo, I was like, well, then who gives the other presents? And then it was they give both of them.
Right.
Oh, yes, I get it.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, mine, I clearly remember it. Christmas of my 3rd grade year, I was 8. It was a long time ago. And I got a dirt bike, not a motorcycle.
Yeah.
A bicycle, but it was a dirt bike, a Rampar 400. Ooh. Still remember it. Blue with red trim. It was a badass bicycle.
That's awesome.
And somebody stole it 3 months later.
What?
No kidding. Maybe that's why I remember it, because it got stolen from me.
I think there's some PTS. There's some trauma there.
It still hurts a little.
There's some trauma there. Or as my wife says, spicy memories.
Well, she's right about that.
I like those. I like spicy memories.
I wasn't happy about that.
Yeah.
Well, Ryan, thanks for coming on. I know
absolutely.
Maybe you didn't have a choice since you work here, but nevertheless, you probably could have found something else to do other than spending time with us here on Cut the Shit.
I've enjoyed it. It's been good.
Well, maybe we'll have you back sometime to talk technology again.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Cut the Shit is brought to you by Plow Networks and is produced by Talia DiDomenico and Emily Starnes. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, we'd be most grateful if you would share it with others who you think might be interested in hearing a somewhat irreverent take on the arcane world of IT. If you aren't enjoying it, well, why are you listening? You can find links to this podcast on our website at plow.net, on our YouTube and Instagram feeds, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, LinkedIn, and probably a bunch of other places too. Or as my kids like to say, just Google that shit. You'll find it for sure. Take care and have a great day.